I was just really conscious from my previous business of having investors that weren't as aligned on certain things, that can create tension. Hi, I'm Kai Wright. I'm the founder of Human Food. We make the world's most nutritionally dense organic food, which at the moment comes in the form of 76-gram bars, but eventually will be in other formats. What's kind of different from Human Food and everything else in the market is that we use entirely whole food nutrients, whereas every single other brand in our category uses synthetic nutrients. So, yeah.
There seems to have been a real rush over the last few years to get into this space where it's the healthier options to, I suppose, already existing brands, but yours seems quite unique. So how and why did you start this business?
Yeah, I left the previous business I was doing, which was a frozen yogurt business, partly because my eating habits had changed. I'd gone vegan and stopped eating sugar, and I was kind of less able to promote that and wasn't able to change the direction of that business. And then I also got the idea for Human Food, so I started Human Food. And it basically came from, I was fortunate enough to have the time and space to kind of really consider what is the best possible diet. And I looked at, I really researched it, and I lived it. And I eventually developed a smoothie that contained pretty much everything I needed each day. And I for about 2 years, I lived off this smoothie, and it was constantly in development. And I just felt amazing from it. I just felt really incredible, kind of the healthiest I'd ever felt. And I passed this smoothie recipe on to lots of friends and family, and several of them kept doing it, but it was just too much effort. And then that's where the idea for Human Food came from. It was just to really simplify what I'd found to be kind of the best possible nutrition supplement, and to make it available to everybody without any effort at all.
Absolutely. So it's making it convenient, I suppose, and efficient in terms of time and getting all the nutrients you need and so on. So talk to
Yeah.
me a bit about how do you target your ideal customer? Because I assume is it everyone or is it a real set type of
Yeah,
person?
yeah. This is obviously, I suppose, for every business the big challenge. It's when I kind of first was conceptualizing Human Food, and the idea basically being just to kind of make the best thing possible regardless of the cost of ingredients, then work out what the cost is, and just assume that there's going to be people out there who value it enough to pay the a price which they need to pay in order for it to work as a business. So that's where we were coming from. And the challenge obviously now is finding those people who are kind of out there and dotted around. And I'm obviously there's enough out there that already exist, even if they're not aware of these kind of issues around, for example, synthetic versus whole food nutrients. But yeah, it's the cost of finding them. And the really big challenge, and that I hadn't anticipated, is just that so many of the other products in this space which do use synthetics use the same language that we would use to differentiate our product. For example, saying this is made of real food, and then having synthetics hidden in the ingredients, which is pretty much companies are doing. So that's the challenge, is kind of getting the message across when there's so much disinformation, which again I'm sure kind of applies to every industry.
Yeah, we found that quite a lot with various founders that seem to struggle with competing on marketing budget with some of the world's biggest brands who put in, say, slightly less sugar and then say they are the healthy alternative or whatever it may be. So what are some of the sort of techniques that you guys use to really get around that and make sure you're getting the right message out there to people?
Yeah, I mean it's evolving our strategy. I mean, I suppose what one method is just to kind of there's kind of too many USPs in a way for our product. It's the most nutritionally dense. It's the only product with whole food nutrients, entirely whole food nutrients. It's the only product which has got no plastic, and all of our packaging is compostable. But it's kind of, if you're trying to get someone's attention in a microsecond in an ad, you obviously can't say all of that stuff. So, I mean, what we've found works really well is just to focus on the experience of having the product, and the way we've kind of encapsulated this based on all of the feedback we get and kind of our own experience is feel the power of whole food nutrients. So it's like a positive, tangible reward that you can get from trying the product. And then once you're kind of engaged, then we can kind of start to talk about the kind of science around whole food nutrients versus synthetics, and we can talk about all of this, the research that we're doing with different universities, and so it's kind of, I think it's just kind of having a digestible kind of nugget of information to kind of get someone engaged, and then hopefully you can kind of keep them engaged and kind of deepen the information.
And is that something you've learned as time has gone on? So in the early days, were you throwing all the USBs at everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that we've definitely learned. So from when I kind of started doing the Kickstarter to our kind of early versions of the website, based on kind of that original piece of reasoning that I told you about, just kind of assuming that if this thing exists and people, you're just clear about what it is without any marketing tricks, without any manipulation whatsoever, then trusting in the intelligence of people who care about this stuff to kind of see and understand. So what that meant was that all of our marketing, all of our presentation of the information was always just human food contains 100% of your B12, 50% of your iron, 50% of your zincs, 50% of your. So it was just a really kind of just a really detailed, informative kind of display of the information, but without any explanation of the reward or any kind of really kind of understandable sense of how it's going to make you feel. So that's kind of a way our messaging has developed a lot over the last kind of 24 months.
Because I suppose you have to put it in a way in layman's terms as well, where people aren't nutritionists but are very interested in making sure they're eating the right stuff and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something it wasn't until I started developing human food that I even became aware there was such a thing as synthetic nutrients or whole food nutrients. So it was only really after, it was because I wanted it to be organic. And then so I was like, okay, and then I tried getting organic certification and they said, no, you can't use any synthetic nutrients because that's precluded by organic certification. And then that's when I kind of was like, wow, what is this thing? And then kind of started understanding what. So it's it's completely understandable that most people aren't. It's never even crossed their mind, that there is, and that's our main USP. So that's the kind of challenge is kind of our USP is around a thing that a lot of people aren't really aware about.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And of course, you've got the two sides of it. So you've got the educating and attracting customers, and then in a similar way, you've got to do the same with investors as well. So you get people to really believe in the product. So, and I think we found founders have seen this in a range of things, where it's, say, deep tech or nutrition or medical or whatever it may be, where there needs to be that real understanding. So what's that been like for you in terms of approaching investors?
We were really fortunate with investment in that. So after our Kickstarter, which we did a Kickstarter, it was the most funded vegan product on Kickstarter of all time. And then following that, I was kind of considering, it was clear that we wouldn't have enough money from that to kind of really launch. So we were looking at other investment options. So I just kind of thought there must be some VCs out there which are just specialize in veganism. So I just searched, vegan VC, and the first one that came up was a brand new venture capital fund in Zurich called Blue Horizon Ventures. And yeah, so I got in touch with them, and they were really interested, and I didn't really have to kind of do a search. I was just really fortunate to kind of find them straight away, and they because they're completely switched on to this whole movement, and their whole mission is to remove, eventually one day, for there not to be meat, for there not to be, for it not to exist. And I'm sure that'll happen when, future more reasonable generations of people look back on kind of how we're living now, and are kind of totally shocked by how we treat animals, or certain animals. But yeah, so we were just really fortunate to find really kind of aligned investors right from the beginning.
So quite an interesting strategy then, I suppose, that I think a lot of founders that can take on board. So essentially you went and sought out the investors that you knew already had the understanding and would just need to get on board with yourselves and the product itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just really conscious from my previous business and having investors that kind of weren't necessarily as aligned on certain things, that can create tension, because if you've got investors who are just trying to maximize profits at all costs, and it's kind of impossible essentially to convince them of the value of using compostable packaging, which is more expensive, and it's going to be just a constant point of conflict. Whereas if you can find investors who are aware of the bigger picture, then it makes things, or at least see it in a similar way to you, then it's going to make things a lot more harmonious.
It sounds like you were massively successful with the Kickstarter campaign as well, and this is an avenue that a lot of founders are considering, mainly as part of their sort of promotional and marketing technique to get their name out there a bit. So what was that like for you, and any real key learnings from that?
Yeah, it was yeah, I learned so much from it. It started off, it was kind of a bumpy start initially, and I think it was partly because we didn't kind of set up the offering quite, we didn't have enough kind of cheap things, so that's something that I would definitely have done a lot more research into like kind of how the people set their shops up. I kind of just did it from a kind of ideological perspective of kind of, this is what I think it should be. But so that was difficult. But then what we found was that as soon as it started getting some momentum, and kind of Kickstarter really liked the project, so they promoted it, and then a lot more people saw it. Then I think it got passed on a lot. I think that was kind of the key to it working, was kind of like a lot of people commented to us that it was the most exciting Kickstarter project they've ever seen. And I think what we managed to do in that video was just kind of capture the concept, kind of what it was, but then also the kind of the feeling of the whole brand, and this kind of idea of a kind of more reasonable future that is attainable. So I think it was just kind of, it was quite an emotive, kind of powerful video, which kind of which got people excited.
So it's really getting people behind the vision as well as just the product itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and then like having seen like loads more Kickstarter videos now, like it's like the way that people normally do it is it's all kind of, it's always about the story, the kind of personal story, which I find generally to be a bit kind of over sentimental and a bit crass. But I guess you just got to pitch it. You got to just pitch it right, and yeah.
Absolutely. So what's next for the brand? What are the big goals for the next year or so?
So yeah, we're launching our product in other formats, and this morning actually we've been doing a tasting session of our latest shake powder versus all the competition, and we're just really excited because I think it's really different to everything else that's in the market at the moment, and it's a really established market. And so yeah, I'm just really excited to launch that product and just get some, like, a lot of feedback. It's been in development for so long. And then more product launches, and yeah, we're also starting to go into retail as well this year, and we're talking with some really interesting retailers. So yeah, it's just yeah, just kind of getting the brand out there and growing, and yeah, it's going to be an exciting year.
Perfect. And for those listening, where can they find out more about both yourself and Human Food?
Yeah, so go to www.humanfood.bio.